Have you ever felt busy all the time, but still behind in life? Like your days are full, your calendar is packed, your body is tired, yet nothing seems to move forward. You wake up early, you rush, you answer messages, you handle responsibilities, you solve other people's problems, and at the end of the day, when everything finally goes quiet, there's a strange feeling sitting in your chest, a feeling that whispers, I did so much today, but why am I still here? Maybe you're exhausted, but not fulfilled. Maybe you're disciplined, but not progressing. Maybe you're doing everything you were told to do, yet your life still feels stuck in the same place. If that sounds familiar, if you've ever wondered how you can be so busy and still feel like you're falling behind, then this story is for you. Because once there was a man who lived exactly that life. And what changed everything for him wasn't a promotion, a breakthrough, or a sudden opportunity. It was a silent routine, a routine so small, so unremarkable that no one noticed it, except that it fixed everything. Stay with me until the end. In a quiet town, on the edge of a growing city, where concrete buildings slowly replaced old wooden houses, lived a man named Elias. Elias was not lazy. No one who knew him would ever say that. He was busy from the moment he opened his eyes to the moment he collapsed into bed. At 34 years old, Elias worked at a logistics company, managing schedules, deliveries, and endless coordination between people who were always late and systems that never worked perfectly. His phone buzzed constantly. Emails never stopped. Meetings filled his days. Deadlines pressed against him like a tightening wall. Every morning, Elias woke before sunrise. He skipped breakfast more often than he liked to admit. He told himself he'd eat later. He never did. He commuted in silence, scrolling through messages, already behind before the day even began. At work, he was dependable. Too dependable. When something went wrong, people called Elias. When someone didn't show up, Elias stayed late. When a problem needed fixing, Elias handled it. He was the kind of person companies love and life quietly drains. At night, Elias came home tired. Not the satisfying tired that comes from progress, but the heavy tired that settles into your bones when effort produces no visible reward. He told himself tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would focus on his goals. Tomorrow, he would work on himself. Tomorrow, he would move forward. Tomorrow never came. Weeks blurred into months, months into years. Elias watched people around him move ahead. Some were promoted. Some started businesses. Some seemed to unlock a version of life that felt unreachable to him. And the strangest part was this. Elias was doing more than most of them. Working harder, stressing more, sacrificing more. So why was he still behind? One night, after another long day that ended with him answering emails in bed, Elias sat in the dark, phone glowing in his hand. His body was tired, but his mind refused to rest. A quiet frustration rose inside him, not loud enough to explode, but heavy enough to suffocate. "I'm doing everything," he whispered to himself. "So why isn't anything changing?" That question followed him for weeks, until one evening, something small happened. On his way home, Elias missed his usual train. Annoyed and drained, he sat on a bench at the station, waiting for the next one. Across from him sat an older man, dressed simply, reading a worn book. Nothing about the man stood out at first, but what caught Elias's attention was not what the man was doing. It was how calm he looked. Not relaxed, not lazy, calm, as if time wasn't chasing him. When the train arrived, they entered the same carriage. They stood near each other, holding onto the same rail as the city lights passed by outside. After a few stops, the train slowed unexpectedly. An announcement crackled overhead. "Delay!" Groans filled the carriage. People checked their phones, sighed, complained. The older man simply closed his book and stood quietly. Elias, already exhausted, let out a frustrated breath. "I don't understand how there's always a delay," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The man looked at him and smiled gently. "Delays feel heavier when we believe we're already late," he said. Elias frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" The man tilted his head. "You looked very busy," he said, "but busy people are often the most behind." The words hit Elias harder than he expected. "That doesn't make sense," Elias replied. "I'm busy because I'm trying to move forward." The man smiled again, not amused, but understanding. "Are you busy moving forward?" he asked softly, "or busy running in place?" Before Elias could answer, the train began moving again. A few stops later, the man stood up. As he exited, he turned back and said one last thing. "Progress doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing the right small things, quietly, every day." Then he was gone. Elias stood there long after the doors closed, the words replaying in his mind. That night, he couldn't sleep. The next morning, Elias woke up as usual, already feeling behind. But something was different. Instead of reaching for his phone immediately, he paused, just for a moment. He remembered the man's words. Doing more wasn't fixing anything. So Elias decided to try something radical. He decided to do less, but not in the way you might think. That morning, Elias chose one small thing. One thing that had nothing to do with his job, his boss, or anyone else's expectations. He made his bed. Not quickly, not halfway. Carefully, he straightened the sheets, smoothed the wrinkles, aligned the pillows. It took less than 2 minutes. It felt insignificant, almost stupid. But when he finished, something subtle happened. The room felt calmer, and for the first time in a long while, Elias felt like he had completed something. Just one thing. That day at work was the same chaos as always. Emails, meetings, problems. But that evening, when Elias came home, instead of collapsing on the couch, he spent 5 minutes preparing his clothes for the next day. Nothing impressive, just simple order. The next morning, he repeated the routine. Made his bed, prepared himself calmly. No one noticed. No one praised him. Nothing dramatic changed. And yet, something was shifting. Days passed, then weeks. Elias added one more small habit. 10 minutes of quiet reflection each morning. No phone, no noise, just sitting. At first, his mind screamed at him. "You're wasting time. You have things to do." But Elias stayed. He noticed how often his thoughts jumped ahead, chasing future problems, replaying past mistakes. He noticed how rarely he was present. Slowly, something inside him settled. At work, Elias began to notice patterns. Noticing, not reacting. He realized much of his exhaustion came not from work itself, but from mental clutter. From saying yes to everything. From reacting to every message as if it were urgent. So he made another small change. He stopped answering emails immediately. Instead, he set 2 specific times during the day to respond. Outside of those windows, he focused on one task at a time. At first, anxiety rose. What if someone needs me? What if something goes wrong? Nothing did. The world didn't collapse. What did happen was subtle but powerful. Elias finished tasks instead of juggling them. He thought more clearly. He made fewer mistakes. People began to notice something they couldn't quite name. "You seem calmer," a coworker said one day. Elias shrugged. "I'm just working differently." Weeks turned into months. Elias was still busy, still tired at times, but he was no longer behind. Because something had changed beneath the surface. The silent routine grew. Each morning, make the bed. 10 minutes of stillness. Clear intention for the day. Each evening, review what mattered. Not what he did, but what moved him forward. Elias stopped measuring his days by activity and started measuring them by alignment. One evening, while cleaning his apartment, Elias found an old notebook buried in a drawer. Inside were goals he had written years ago, dreams he once cared deeply about. He sat on the floor, reading them. For the first time, they didn't feel overwhelming. They felt possible, because Elias was no longer trying to fix his life in one dramatic move. He was fixing it quietly, daily, grain by grain. A year passed. Without realizing it, Elias had changed. His work improved, not because he worked more hours, but because he worked with clarity. He was promoted, not because he chased it, but because he had become reliable in a deeper way. Not frantic, not reactive, steady. But more important than the promotion was this: Elias no longer felt lost in his own life. One evening, after work, Elias found himself back at the same train station where he had met the older man. As he waited, he looked around, watching people rush, scroll, complain. He recognized his old self in them. When the train arrived, Elias stepped inside, calm, grounded, and for a moment, he smiled, because he finally understood something most people never do. Being busy is easy. Being intentional is rare. Exhaustion doesn't come from effort. It comes from effort without direction. The silent routine didn't make Elias special. It made him aligned. And alignment changes everything. If you're busy, tired, and still behind. Let me ask you something. What is one small thing you could do tomorrow morning that would bring order instead of chaos? Not a massive plan. Not a life overhaul. One small, quiet act, done with care, because your life doesn't change when things finally slow down. It changes when you decide what deserves your energy. Remember this: progress is quiet, transformation is subtle, and the routines that fix everything rarely look impressive from the outside. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people who feel stuck find it. Leave a comment and tell me what silent routine could change your life if you committed to it. And if you want more stories like this, stories that don't just motivate you but realign you, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back with another story soon. Until then, remember this: you are not behind because you're doing too little. You're behind because your effort needs direction. Fix the small things quietly, and everything else will follow.